Unitarian Universalism is considered perhaps to be the most tolerant of all religions. And yet as individuals, and even from our own pulpit, we are often critical of the practices of other religions. I personally have been accused frequently of being intolerant. I know I walk a fine line, and sometimes not very well. I can say little in my own defense except that I keep working on being more tolerant. When my brain and my emotions are all in synchrony, I try never to devalue one's personal beliefs, regardless of how different they are from my own. I try never to openly criticize a person's personal relationship with the mystery. I am, however, intolerant of some things. I am dreadfully intolerant of ignorance, stupidity, abuse, manipulation, militarism, sexism, racism, the destruction of democracy, and free thought, just to name a few things. From this pulpit, I have expressed intolerance for religious practices that injure humanity. And I'm sure that I frequently cross the line. So for that, I apologize. I make no apology, however, for confronting tyranny, and that certainly includes religious tyranny. The Church has contributed perhaps more than any other social invention to the abuse of humanity. For example, my title this morning is Adam's Bent Rib. It's a talk about women. Specifically, it's a talk about the abuses of women and the role that the Church has played in their condition. In the 16th century, the Church issued a report that read as follows, and I quote, "Woman is far more deceitful than man. The reason is that there was a defect in the formation of the first woman. The defect was that she was formed with one of Adam's bent ribs. Thus, she will always be deceitful. And witchcraft comes from such deceit. Therefore, women are always to be subservient to men," close quote. I do pick on the Church, but they give me such a wealth of material to choose from. The world of our ancestors barely holds a resemblance to the world that you and I know. Their world generally encompassed only a few square miles, with very little input from the outside world. Even today, in some countries and in some cities in the U.S., people barely venture beyond the borders of their own little small towns. Whereas for most of us, our world reaches far beyond even our own galaxy. We receive news and information from all over the world as it happens. We see pictures and hear the sound and see events actually occurring all the way around the globe. Early humans knew only people from their tribe and perhaps a few others who happened to be passing through. Their knowledge was limited to their own very narrow experiences, their own perceptions, their observations, and what they were told by their leaders. And in that respect, we're much the same. We are all prisoners of our own experiences and the programming that we receive from others. And I do mean programming, not education. Humanity has certainly been far more conditioned and programmed than it has been educated. The very foundations of education require that we question, that we seek answers, that we use reasoning. But we're much more likely to accept what we are told by the government from pulpits than we are to use our own reasoning power. I think that's evidence for our ability and propensity to be programmed. The fact that nearly all early people had religion is often touted as proof for the existence of God. I submit to you that this may just as likely be evidence of our vulnerability to be programmed and conditioned. The single most important reason for religion is to supply us with answers to the questions that our experiences cannot answer. Therefore, in primitive cultures, religion was a fertile field for brutal, ignorant, tribal people. We can all observe that as knowledge has grown, the influences of gods have dramatically diminished. Fear and ignorance fuel the flames of religion, whereas curiosity and knowledge kept these flames from consuming us and becoming totally barbaric. So for millennia, we have all precariously balanced between myth and fact, between science and religion, between feelings and thoughts. And this brings us back to women. Women have been religion's scapegoat for thousands of years. Before that, however, women were the healers, the priestess, the goddesses. The evolution of this position in the tribal structure is a logical one. Women did most of the work, while men went out to hunt and conduct warfare, which was their main occupation. So when men came home with war wounds or hunting wounds, who healed them? Who took care of them? Who parented them? Who got them ready so they could go back out to war? Women. Women, like Mother Earth, sustained the tribe. Their power and position grew because they were magical. They could give birth. They were the womb man. They could give birth. It was probably very late in our evolution that we realized that men had anything to do with procreation at all. And if one doesn't understand procreation, the more miraculous birth must have seemed even more miraculous than it does today. Another magical element about women is blood. Blood is associated with birth. Blood is associated with life fluids, and blood is associated with death. These magical women, the womb man, could bleed and not die, could give birth. So they were the goddesses. They were giving birth, healing the sick, parenting the tribe. Blood was so magical and mystical in so many cultures that they ended up painting their sick and their dead with the red color of ochre. Early graves reveal ochre-colored bodies, the color of Earth Mother's womb. Menstrual blood was often referred to as woman's flower. Now, flower precedes fruit, so it was forbidden for anyone to come in contact with mother's flower. Does that sound remarkably close to that idea of don't touch the forbidden fruit? Throughout history, blood was a sacred symbol. Whether it was the blood of Mother Isis, in Persia it was the milk of Mother Goddess, It was the milk of Mother Goddess Estar. The female fertility symbol was often the Egyptian symbol of the Ankh. All of you know, some of you may have it on a bracelet. The other symbol for female genitalia and fertility was the fish. We now see it on the back of cars. Wouldn't it shock some people to realize that the ankh they have on their bracelet or the little fish they have on the back of their car is the symbol of female genitalia and fertility? Women quickly rose to the position of power and respect because they were magical and they were feared. The very first Trinity that I can find anywhere was the Virgin, the Mother, the Crone. That was the first Trinity. Males have always struggled to conquer their fear. That's why they went to battle. So if you fear women, you want to conquer women, own women, control women, even get even with women, punish them, teach them a lesson. And men began to do just that. So as men finally began to rise to power levels, such as becoming priest, they gained more power and the scales began to tip. Rich and powerful men began to change the rules. By controlling wealth, they could control the priest. Men became powerful by conquering through brute force and cunning. The more powerful they became, the more rules they could impose upon women, as well as other weaker men. Women could make life, but men could destroy life. Powerful men dictated the rules to the priest, who then dictated the rules to women and weaker men. Rules that strangled the past and set humanity on a different course. The very first act of this was to frame Eve. The mother goddess, Eve, she became the servant of man, made from man himself, with a bent rib, of course, to be the glory of man as man is the glory of God. What a giant step down from giver of all life to helper made from a defective rib. Things really got worse from that point. Eve was the perfect scapegoat to give men a reason to hate women and to master them. Over time, these things began to be written into the religious literature to justify the abuses of women. St. Paul excuses Adam by saying that Eve was, and I quote, in the transgression, close quote. So it wasn't Adam's fault, it was Eve's fault. The ancient Hebrew text of Enoch said that God created death to punish humanity, but all the blame was squarely placed on Eve. It is in the Gospel of Philip in the Nag Hammadi Library where it explains that death came to the world not because of Eve's sin, but because of the splitting of the androgynous body, the Adam-Eve, mother, father, life-giver. Had they not been split, according to mythology, there would be no death. But of course, the Gnostic scriptures were conveniently left out of the Bible. Hatred for women was likely the result of their life-giving power and a long, long history of matriarchy. Religion not only allowed the abuse of women, it was made clear that it was the pious duty of men to routinely beat women. Did I say beat? How about rape, slavery, abuse, and unspeakable savagery toward women? Husbands were advised weekly from the pulpit to beat women, quote, with sticks or whips, not out of rage, but out of charity and with concern for her soul. Close quote. A 12th century decretum said, and I quote, it is right that he whom women led into wrongdoing should have her under his direction, so that he may not fail a second time through female levity. Close quote. According to men, the devil has always worked his mischief through women because they are the weaker vessel. Not only were women turned into depraved monsters by the church, but they were yoke-fellowed with mythical, magical demons, horrifying devils. They were one and the same. The man who is considered the father of modern Christianity, Quintus Septimus Tertullian, declared that women were to blame for all death. She destroyed, and I quote, God's image, man. Quote, even the Son of God had to die because of woman. Close quote. Ecclesiastical writings taught men to fear women and to hate women, and referred to them as such things as the following: the confusion of man, the insatiable beast, continuous anxiety, the daily ruin. It was said that her glance could poison and intoxicate the mind. Close quote. Don't you wish? The world would be a better place if we just get some of that intoxication. You know, when I think about this, it must have been one heck of a hard sell to convince women to give up all that power and become servants, lesser beings. Either that or it was unthinkable brutality. Prior to that time, women handled all of the marriages. Women handled all of the burials. They did all of the rituals. The communion up to that time was all performed by women until this fledgling paternal monotheism came into existence. Beginning about the time of Mithra, or Mithras, and Zoroaster, through Jesus, the communion cakes were marked with the sign of the cross. Now, the amazing thing about that is that the cross is the earliest symbol of masculinity. This cross represented the phallus. You can see how these things get used and turned and used for other purposes, but the original cross was the sign of the phallus. Churches purposely ignored, rejected, and suppressed the Gnostic Gospels. And in the Gnostic Gospels today, it says that Eve and the serpent were humanity's savior. They helped Adam to acquire knowledge of good and evil. They even took Lucifer, the light bearer, and turned the light bearer, the bringer of light, on ignorance, into Satan. Let no light fall on the sheep. Medicine, which had been almost the exclusive domain of women, was stripped from them, and any woman who practiced healing was considered a witch. The Catholic Church declared that, and I quote, no one does more harm to the Catholic Church than midwives. Close quote. By the time the 14th century rolled around, it was all-out war on women. For a period of approximately 5 centuries in Europe, starting in the late 1400s, approximately 9 million women and a few men were murdered. They were executed because the church propagated fear and ignorance. But the church wasn't about to stop, because this was the church's single largest cash crop for any woman and a few men who were accused of witchcraft or practicing medicine. They could confiscate all of their personal property. Now notice I said at accusation. Didn't even have to wait for the trial. The minute someone was accused of witchcraft or practicing medicine, if it was a female, they confiscated all of their property. Now, not only did they confiscate their property, they could confiscate the property to the third generation. It's just astounding how strange it is that before this genocide began, the Scottish term for witch meant friend of man. The violent destruction of the goddess system by the Christian church caused such an outrage that the Council of Bishops in 432 current age was besieged by citizens threatening violence against them, demanding a restoration of their goddess. In an act of appeasement and to save their own necks, the bishops instituted the cult of Mary in the goddess's Ephesian temple. Now later, these same bishops voted to have Mary's virginity restored. Mary's virginity was restored by a democratic vote. How you like that? Anyone want to push for that constitutional amendment? Even the current word Bible comes from the ancient word biblos, which was one of the Great Mother's oldest sacred cities. This is where the Mother Goddess's scrolls were kept. Eve's name will forever be used in torment. But according to Genesis 5:5, after eating from the tree of life, Adam lived nearly 1,000 years. It's just not fair to go from the symbol of life to less than dirt as a long fall. The hieroglyphic symbol for woman is the delta, the D. Think of it. It is the gate of life, the delta. The Greek symbol for woman is the symbol for female genitalia, the omega. All of you know how that looks, the omega. The omega was the gateway, life giver, the doorway to life. Incidentally, omega means the great Om. Some of you know that. Om. That's the symbol for female genitalia. Even today, without knowing it, we honor women by hanging the horseshoe above the door, which is the omega. We hang the horseshoe above the door to protect the household. That's where the horseshoe came from. The Eucharistic cup is just a very slight modification from the old churning cup used by female healers. The witch's cauldron symbolized the cosmic mother's body. The subjugation and abuse of women not only has been the preoccupation of the church, but it has prevailed in law. In 1770, British Parliament, which of course was composed of all men, imposed the same penalty as for witchcraft on any woman who used any artificial means to lure a man into marriage. Now, these artificial means included such things as makeup, corsets, false hair, false teeth, high heels, anything like that. So, because of that law, if a man married a woman and all of a sudden he decided, what the heck am I doing in this? He just had to go to Parliament and say, she lured me in with makeup. He was free and she was treated as a witch. Astounding. Things did not begin to change in Europe and elsewhere in the world until the Renaissance gained acceptance. The intelligentsia began to question the patriarchal religions. This led to budding atheism, agnosticism, and the free thought movement. Things have changed, but I don't want to leave you with the impression that we have matured as a species, and we certainly, males, have not matured as a gender. But if you have church leaders and you have all of this church literature promoting hatred, it is terribly hard to overcome. I remind you that in 584 current age, the Council of Bishops convened in Lyons, France, and out of the 63 voting bishops or representatives, 32 of them voted yes to the question that women are human. 31 voted no, that women were not human. So women were declared human by one vote. Tertullian said, "Woman is a temple built over a sewer, the gateway to hell. Woman are the devil." St. Clement of Alexandria, "Every woman should be overwhelmed with the shame at the thought that she is a woman." Close quote. St. John Chrysostom, "Among all of the savage beasts, none are so bestial as women." St. Augustine, "Any woman who does not give birth to as many children as she is capable of is guilty of murder." Martin Luther, "Women should stay at home, sit still, keep house, bear children. If a woman grows weary and dies from childbearing, it does not matter. Let her die childbearing. That is all she is here for." Close quote. John Wesley, the founder of the Methodists, quote, "Wife, be content to be insignificant. Of what loss would it be to God or man had you never been born?" Close quote. Presbyterian John Knox got in the act. "Woman was made to serve and obey man." Corinthians has a few things to say. Now that's a piece of work, Corinthians. Corinthians 1:14. "In all the churches, women shall keep silent in the church. They are not permitted to speak, but they shall be under obedience. If there is anything they desire to know, let them ask their husbands when they get home. It is shameful for a woman to speak in church." Close quote. Or, quote, "For a man is the image of and the glory of God, but a woman is the glory of man. Man was not created for woman, but woman was created for man." Is it any surprise that Thomas Jefferson called the Bible a dunghill? He also said, quote, "These so-called sacred scriptures are the writings of ignorant and bigoted men," close quote. It still goes on today, but at a much more subtle level. The current newspaper columnist, and certainly a historical illiterate and born again, Cal Thomas, chimes in to say, and I quote, "Before career women hogged the spotlight and eclipsed the homemakers, before radical feminists reduced men to wimps and reduced women to the, quote, equality of men, before daycare centers and before all of this, there was a certain type of woman known as a lady. She wasn't stuck up, as are the ladies who lunch," close quote. In other words, stay home, barefoot, pregnant, keep your mouth shut. I think it was just last year, 2003, a Muslim cleric in Spain wrote a book titled How to Beat Your Wife Without Leaving Marks, close quote. Muslim women still have to cover their faces because their mouth is considered obscene. It resembles the vulva. Frightening, intimidated, imbecilic men of superstitious beliefs have committed the greatest long-standing crime in the history of humanity: the conversion of woman to the status of a possession. This type of ignorance, fear, and subjugation has permeated the church, government, and society for approximately 4 millennia. We must all grudgingly hold on to our right to think for ourselves, to use our reasoning, to treat each other humanely, to love and to care for one another, because it is loving and caring that has sustained us as a species. The wonderful writer and perhaps one of the most admired syndicated columnists in our history, H.L. Mencken, had this to say, and I quote, "The most dangerous man to any government is the man who is able to think things out himself without regards to the prevailing superstitions and taboos. Almost inevitably, he will come to the conclusion that the government he lives under is dishonest, insane, and intolerable." Close quote. We've come a long way, but we have a long way to go. I am convinced, I am the eternal optimist, that if we keep trying, one day we will rise above the stupidity and suspicion of the past, and that we can truly grow into humane humans. I would like to close with the words of Walt Whitman, and his message to you is, quote, "Women, you are the gate to the soul." So be it.